of West Asia. We have seen that in the past decade, India's relationship with most of the countries from UAE to Saudi Arabia to Qatar to Oman have really increased in their strength. And economic strength has been one of the major factors between India and the Middle Eastern nations today. Ambassador Trugnath, we also see that we got some major positive news in the morning today about the release of the ex Navy personnel from Qatar. How do you see this news, especially in the context of the fact that India today enjoys excellent relations with all Middle Eastern nations?
Simranji, let me just try to give it a bit of a context. We have a historic and civilizational relationship and partnership with these countries. And these go back to thousands of years to Dilmun civilization, Indus Valley civilization. And since then, the maritime routes, all they used to pass through Oman and some other countries to Europe, that has been existing since then. And which you can see now again, we are trying to revive through IMEC and other corridors. At the same time, the P2P Connect has always been alive. Another thing that was very interesting until 70s, the Indian rupee was a legal tender in those countries. And if you come to think of it now, with the efforts of Prime Minister Modi, we are seeing the acceptance of UPI and the Indian rupee and the bilateral trade occurring again in this area. But for decades, I would say, there was a very big deficit in our partnership and relationship, and that existed in the high level visits and interactions. You'll be surprised that after Indira Gandhi's visit in 1982, until 2008 and all, we did not have a visit by any Indian Prime Minister to these countries. And they're just 2.5, 3 hours away. And that has been one of their biggest grudge. Of course, there were certain factors, whether it was the Pak factor, that has been completely decimated now, because of which the relationship was more transactional. And as I mentioned, that there were hardly any visits until 2008, when the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh came to Qatar, Oman, and Saudi Arabia in 2010. But again, this was like anarchism, not really in a strategic context. But with the onset of Prime Minister Modi, whatever hesitations and the concerns the Arab countries had, Prime Minister's first visit was to UAE. And then he visited other countries, and the relationship with most of these countries became strategic, truly strategic partnership. And that was the game changer in our partnership with these countries, because they also realized that the growing India, how it was moving, how the Indian opportunity was occurring, those countries were also tending to diversify their relationships. The global game changing that was happening in the geopolitics also dictated that their policy becomes Act East. Act East means more towards India and China. And that's what we saw happening in the last few years. And Prime Minister Modi, you can imagine, it was like he has been there already 6 times, and he's there for the 7th visit of his to UAE, basically also for the diaspora event, as well as for opening this famous Abu Dhabi temple, which is going to be the biggest and the first in the region in that sense. So we are seeing that the relationship in the P2P domain, in the economic domain, in the diaspora domain, in the domain of a strategic partnership, be it space, be it nuclear, be it energy security, food security, whichever way you look at it, has become very, very strong now and is clearly visible. We have also seen that there have been India until recently used to mostly deal in bilateral context with each country. But then in recent times, we have seen after the Abraham Accords that there have been quadrilaterals, I to U to India, UAE, USA, Israel, IUS to India, USA, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. And also IMAC, which will have Saudi Arabia, Israel, and all this corridor, connectivity corridor. So these are very major initiatives, which are giving a change in the policy. While India also changed its policy, which is called nowadays de-hyphenation of the foreign policy. That means each relationship stands on its own. That is, our support, principal support, stand and everything for Palestinian cause remains unshaken. At the same time, we have a tremendous relationship, a strong strategic partnership with Israel. And where also for the first time, Prime Minister Modi became the first Prime Minister actually to visit both Palestine and Israel, apart from many of these Gulf and Arab states and Iran as well. So this is today a relationship of tremendous consequence, I would say, which is happening, which is based essentially on 3 E's: the energy, the economy, and the expatriates. Now, that the way our relationship has moved, the way it has deepened, the way the interdependencies have increased, where India is concerned about the stability and security of the region, it is imperative that the bilateral relationship regional context, and global context all are taken into account in our relationship. So, this is why I say that when Prime Minister Modi was in Abu Dhabi last time for the COP28, that was his sixth visit. And at that time, he had a meeting with Amir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim. And he did raise, I understand, the question of our naval personnel who have been in the jail. While we fully appreciated and respected the law of the land, the due process of law, provided all the diplomatic and legal assistance to our personnel, and continued the diplomatic dialogue with Qatar, we are really happy to see that it is because of that relationship. It is because of the India-Qatar relationship between Prime Minister Modi and Sheikh Tamim, that we are seeing today a very happy ending to this very sad saga of these ex-Navy personnel being in prison in Qatar. So that hopefully is behind us, and we are already moving forward with several major deals and other things that are happening.
Ambassador Trugnath, if we could talk a little more at length with the India's relationship with the UAE, and as you have given the background, we've seen that the India relationship with UAE has really progressed. And we have Prime Minister Modi. He will be going to the UAE and he'll be there 13th and 14th of February. And as you pointed out, he will be addressing a major diaspora event on the 13th. And 14th, there is the inauguration of the Hindu temple in Abu Dhabi. And if we look at the fact that the Prime Minister was there in December last year for the COP28, then we had the UAE President visiting India as chief guest in the Vibrant Gujarat Summit earlier this year. How do you assess the fact that there has been this frequent high-level visits between India and the UAE? How much has this added the thrust to what you were just telling us about the India-UAE ties specifically?
Now, coming to India-UAE, I would say that this is a flagpole relationship in the region. UAE Prime Minister was the first one to go, and you rightly mentioned that the Sheikh Zayed was the chief guest at Gujarat Vibrant Summit. Before that, he was here for the G20 summit when we signed that very famous agreement. And India had actually invited 3 countries other than Saudi Arabia, which is a part of G20, as a special guest. You know, the Oman, the UAE, and Egypt. There were 3 other countries who are also all our strategic partners, were part of the G20 summit in India. So India has been consciously, in my view, focusing on West Asia. And if I were to say that this is a relationship, in my view, among the great foreign policy successes of this government, has been their West Asia policy. Now, UAE is our, as you know, 3rd largest trading partner. We have thousands of Indian companies. The largest Indian diaspora in the Gulf is resident in UAE, 3.3 million plus. And Prime Minister will be addressing them as well. And this is called regional PVDs, which are held also. So there will be this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, which is being held now on the 13th. And then on the 14th, there will be inauguration of this temple. Now, this temple is not something easy. You know, there is a temple in Bahrain, which is said to be about 200 years old. Then there are small temples in different places, which are operating out of this in different countries like Oman and others. But this is to allocate a big piece of land, and on which a very famous and very gigantic temple is being built, which shows you policy changes in those countries. Because UAE is trying to project itself as a country where all religions are respected, where the interfaith is prevalent. So it's a more modernizing kind of a partnership that is emerging in the context both of religion, economy, and investments with the countries. Now, you know that Prime Minister Modi's, this will be his 7th visit, is very unusual. It has not happened before. That also itself is a testament. Another big testament is all these countries in the Gulf, including Palestine, have conferred the highest state honor on Prime Minister Modi, which was also never happened before. And I don't think it happened to any other leader in the world.
Ambassador Trugnath, as we discuss the West Asia region, UAE, and the news coming out of Qatar today, which is great news for India, we also see that the region has been caught in the spike in the violence ever since 7th October and the horrific terrorist attack by Hamas. How do you see this playing out in the background as India maintains its ties with the UAE, with Oman, with other nations? The Israel-Palestine conflict doesn't seem to be going in the direction of a quick resolution. How does this impact it, and how does India then maintain its own positions while maintaining its ties with all West Asian nations?
Well, it is true. This is the biggest concern for India. And I have been always saying that if anything goes wrong there, that is going to be having a direct impact on India's health, frankly. in my view: economy, energy, expatriates. All three people will be directly impacted in that, apart from the maritime lanes, which we have seen recently with the Houthi attacks, what happened. Now, it is important and imperative, and India's position is also that there should be a two-state solution. There should be a direct dialogue between the two parties, that there should be cessation of hostilities, that there should be respect for the humanitarian law. And India has been Prime Minister Modi, Dr. Jaishankar, they have all been talking to their counterparts in different countries. Dr. Jaishankar was recently in Iran as well, in the wake of these Houthi attacks, as well as Russia. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to all the leaders several times, urging them to take care of the plight of these Palestinian people. Of course, India condemned the terror attacks. That is our fundamental principle. This is our principal policy, both in terms of the terrorism. There is no compromise, zero terror. At the same time, we also have a principled policy on the issue of Palestine, but that needs to be addressed, because the fundamental and core aspects, if they are not addressed, this has been a 75-year-old issue. This will continue to conflagrate again and again. This was the fifth war that we saw between Israel and Hamas. And it is not ending anywhere, because nobody is victorious in this war. Everybody is defeated. And the region is on the edge at the moment. But I believe today, United States is the only country that has some levers over Israel to tell them that enough is enough. At the same time, the Arab countries need to show and contain Hamas as well, and so that the 130-odd hostages that have been still there and the terrorist aspect, the extremist aspect could be addressed and negotiation could begin. So in my view, if the Palestinian issue is not the core addressed, we will continue to see it again and again.
Ambassador Tripnath, going back to something that you touched on initially about the fact that today we also find that India and many nations of the Middle East being part of the same multinational forums. And we've seen that at the G20 summit, which was held last year, India invited the UAE as a special guest. Both Saudi Arabia and UAE have joined BRICS as of January this year. There is the I2U2 formation, which has India, Israel, the UAE. They're all together in this forum also. Do you feel that the fact that apart from the bilateral ties, the fact that India and, for example, say the UAE, and today we look at Oman as one of India's closest defense partners in the region, the fact that nations sit together in multilateral forums will also give them a stronger voice when it comes to global issues?
Well, of course, that's absolutely true. In fact, now the way the world order is fractured today, there is no order. We are living through a transitional order or a disorder. No one listens to anybody. Everybody does what they want to. But at the same time, it is important that wherever multilaterals, plurilaterals, organizations which you mentioned, are the areas where you can move forward on important issues while addressing the global issues at the same time. Now, what we are seeing that the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and others which are participating and joining, and Iran also joining CO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, and there is expansion that is expected. And there are so many of them are dialogue partners also in these organizations. So I think that shows you that the transitional world order is trying to veer away towards the East. And that is something that is going to eventually stabilize and settle down. And it is in India's interest, and which India is very actively engaged, from G20 down to I2U2, to IUSU, to the IMEC, to the BRICS, to the SCO. In all these organizations, India is very actively engaged and participating. And I think that's where eventually we are going to see the bilateral plus sub-regional plus regional plus global context all coming together in order to stabilize the global order. And that is, I believe, is the priority of the countries, but their myopic geopolitical ends are coming in the way also. That is, we are seeing on a daily basis.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions about India's relations with the Middle Eastern nations as we follow Prime Minister Modi's visit to the UAE on February 13th and 14th. With this, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on strengthening relations between India and West Asian countries. The participants were Anil Kumar Trigunayath, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.